Welcome, everybody, to the fourth episode of Stories from the Last Territory, podcast that covers the golden years of wrestling in Puerto Rico. My name is Luis Cuevas, better known as Caveman, and I'm your host for this trip back in time to the island of Puerto Rico when Capital Sports Promotion ruled the island. Thanks to everyone who has sent their feedback. If you like what you hear, please share, subscribe to the page in YouTube, and spread the word about this humble podcast. I'm glad that you guys enjoy, especially last week's episode talking about the A to C. It's a lot of you have mentioned that it gave you guys a good idea of who were the major players, and some of you have even brought that you guys enjoy really the Hercules against Carlos Colon feud podcast. So hopefully, spread the word, let everybody know that we're talking about the history of the golden years of wrestling in Puerto Rico. This week, we're going to be heading back to late spring, early summer of 1988, and we're going to be covering one of the best mid-card feuds and one that changed uh, professional wrestling in the island and opened the door to a new style of wrestling that even to this day is still being held in the island. And we're going to be talking about the Miguel Perez Jr. versus Super Black Ninja of Great Muta failed for the Puerto Rican title. Before we start, it'd be good to explain what was going on during the time in Puerto Rico wrestling that this feud happened. Puerto Rico, as a lot of people know, was always characterized as a bloody territory. Hardcore matches, a lot of stipulation matches, a lot of the Southern wrestling inspired by Memphis, Tennessee wrestling, and so and so. But even for Puerto Rico standards, the spring of '88 was crazy. Literally, you could squeeze your TV in your skin and blood was going to come out. That's how crazy things were down here in Puerto Rico during the spring and early summer of 1988. Houses were a little down. The feud of Iron Sheik against Carlos Colon and Carlos Colon versus Danny Spivey were not as good as they were expecting. So houses were a little down. Eh, Some of the feuds seemed kind of a little tired by this time. So what does Capital Sports Promotion do? Well, they amp the blood. I mean, and they went crazy with it. There was blood on TV almost every other segment. You had in the span of a month and a half the famous Manny Fernandez jumping on Invader 3 and him puking blood and vomiting all over the ring that I think everybody, even if you're not a fan of Puerto Rico wrestling, has at least seen once in your life. You also had the Cataño massacre, where in a TV taping, the Rube Lakers, led by Chiqui Star, set a trap to the Invader 1 and 2 and Carlos Colon and left them for dead in the ring. I mean, the beating that the faces took in that match, you have to see it. It's in Armstrong Alley. And I mean, Invader 1 and Carlos Colon just dripping blood all over the arena in Cataño. It was not a nice sight to see. You had Hercules Ayala and TNT battering all over Puerto Rico for the Caribbean title in all kinds of stipulation matches, barbed wire, hands fist, chain matches, you name it. Those two were going at it for the Caribbean title. And then to top it off, you had the return of Runstar and him wrapping Invader One with barbed wire in the city of Caguas all over his body. So you had, all kinds of craziness, hardcore violence, just blood for the sake of blood, just trying to lift the houses up. And in the middle of all that chaos and craziness and all that blood and violence, you had pure wrestling between Miguel Perez and Super Black Ninja. And that's one of the reasons why that feud or that storyline has is still remembered 36 years later in the island of Puerto Rico because it was so different from everything crazy that was going on in the island during this time. Even for fans of Puerto Rico, we were like, man, this is a little too much. This whole blood every week is just a tad too much. But we had Miguel Perez and Super Black Ninja. Keiji Mutoh, Super Black Ninja, Great Muta, however you want to call him, was a wrestler that came from New Japan Pro Wrestling and was sent, like usually during that time, to gain experience. And they sent him to Puerto Rico, which in itself was a very interesting deal because before that, we mostly received wrestlers from Babas or Japan as part of the arrangement with the National Wrestling Alliance that Capital Sports Promotion in one time was part of it. But by the end of '87, thanks to Victor Quiñones, it seemed that arrangement was done, or at least not an exclusive deal anymore, as we start getting wrestlers from New Japan to Puerto Rico, and that brought another level of professional wrestling from the old Japan wrestlers that we were used to. Super Black Ninja debuted in the island at the beginning of 1988, and according to Matt Farmer's records, his first match was in a card that was held on January 30, 1988, at the Roberto Clemente Stadium, facing none other than Invader 3 or Johnny Rivera, who at that time was considered the best junior heavyweight wrestler in the island and who had wrestled in the old WWF. But I'm sure and I'm positive that he had a match on the TV taping before that, because usually that's where everybody debuted, in the TV tapings, and then they had their first match in one of the big cards. He was being managed by El Profe, and he was part of a group called the Ninja Express, a group alongside Kendo Nagasaki and Mr. Pogo. And when he debuted, the best way I can compare him to American fans was when you guys saw Tiger Mask. That's how we felt when we saw Super Black Ninja in Puerto Rico. We had never seen a wrestler like him in the island. He changed totally the perception of Japanese wrestlers that had come before in the island. And, sadly, besides Baba and, or whoever he brought as his tag team partners, we always got the ugly stereotype of Japanese wrestlers, the salt throwing, the doing the ceremony, the wearing the sandals. But here comes this wrestler who has nothing like that, and he had speed, his moves. We had never seen moves like that in the island. His incredible moonsault, he blew everybody's mind, and he became an instant star in the island. Even when he was a bad guy, we didn't care. I mean, this guy was so good and so different to whatever we have ever seen in the island, that everybody was just attracted to him. And even to this day, 36 years later, Super Black Ninja, Keiji Mutoh, you mention him, and you see a smile on people's faces, because everybody remembers the first time they saw him and how life changed after that, because he was the first of his kind that came to the island. And we have to give credit to Capital Sports Promotion. They did a great job of doing some amazing video packages of him training, being this mystery wrestler. He even had like a horror music song, when they were doing those video package. And he really captivate all of us that had never seen a wrestler like him in the island. And we were like, man, where did this guy came from? And, we started, like following him, because he was that great as a wrestler. On the other side, we have Miguel Perez Jr., who arguably is the greatest in-ring wrestler of the history of Puerto Rico. A wrestler who, with his height, his weight, could move like a junior heavyweight. He could pull moves. He could do third rope moves. He could fly. He could do, a lot of the moves that nobody else was doing at that time. And who also was an incredible ring technician who could go move with anybody. And he also had like an old school feeling, thanks to his dad and thanks to the way he was brought up in the wrestling in Puerto Rico. Since his debut in late 84 to beginning of 85, it seemed like he was being groomed to be the next face of the company. You saw him doing a tag team with Carlos Colon, even winning the World Tag Team titles. You saw him in all the pre-anniversary shows, training with the big two, with Carlos and Invader, getting ready for the weekend of anniversary. And he even faced NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair in anniversary 86, in which was a very good match, in my opinion. Besides the October 1682 match of Carlos Colon and Ric Flair, the best NWA heavyweight match in the island of Puerto Rico was the Miguel Perez against Ric Flair match in Maya West. And he showed his potential as a main eventer and future face of the promotion. His only weakness was his skills on the mic. In a territory that basically depended on promos to sell the matches, so it was a weird time, as in the ring, no one could touch him. But compared to Carlos and especially Invader, his promos were really lacking compared to those two. So we saw the potential of, man, here's this guy. Nobody can wrestle like him. He has the look, he has the height, he has the weight, but his promos are not as passionate as the other two. So that kind of hurt him a little bit. And in 1987, after those first 2 years where he was being pushed as the new face of the company, it seemed like the company pushed back and held him back a little. And for the most part, he had been a wrestler doing tag teams. He had a tag team with Big Red. He had a tag team with Huracan Castillo Jr. They were known as the Caribbean Express. They won the North American titles. They challenged every now and then for the World Tag Team titles. And single wise, well, he wrestled different people. And his big feud of 1987, if you can call it that, was against a wrestler called the Clutcher or Rick Morgan in here in the States. And he had a very good feud with him, and it ended in an I Quit match in Anniversary 87 in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. But during this time, with Carlos, Invader, and TNT had just turned babyface, and they became like the main guys, and all the blood on top, it seemed like he was a little lost in the shuffle. He had won the Puerto Rico heavyweight title from Kareem Mohammed and at the end of 1987, and he had been successfully defending his title against a variety of opponents. But he really didn't have a main feud, one that could re-energize his career back to the early days of 1986, where he was being groomed as the next guy. Well, enter Super Black Ninja, and they became great dance partners. The matches between them, like I mentioned, were something that we had never seen before in the island, especially considering everything else that was going around. At least you knew with those two, you were going to get a good pro wrestling match, 10 to 15 minutes of moves and chemistry, and it was amazing. Their first match occurred on the date of February 27, 1988. Uh, Capital Sports Promotion every year during this time had a tournament called the Gillette Cup, and we're going to be talking about that in a later episode, where they paused pretty much everything that was going on, all the feuds and all the storylines, to have this tournament. And most of the time, it was in honor of Antonino Roca, or it was in honor of Miguel Perez Padre, the two legends of wrestling in Puerto Rico. And they had wrestlers come from other territories, and they will have a one night tournament. It was kind of refreshing to see because, again, it put a pause to everything else that was going on, and it gave fans like a little breather. Okay, we have this tournament, and usually the tournament was pretty good with some very interesting matches and some very interesting brackets, and they will use it sometimes to set up feuds that would continue in the spring or summer of whatever year they were held in that Gillette Cup. Uh, that was their first match, and they put on a 10-minute classic where you could tell the chemistry between them was off the chart. It seemed like Miguel found somebody who could go move with him, and it showcased Super Black Ninja and all those crazy moves and all those new things that we had never seen in the island. They just seemed to complement each other real good. I had an interview. I interviewed Miguel Perez as part of his 40-year career, and he mentioned that even though they didn't had they had the language barrier, they just by looking at each other could tell what was next. And it's very interesting, that interview with Miguel Perez. You could check it out. It's in Spanish, but you could check it out in my page in YouTube of how he talks about this feud against the Super Black Ninja. Well, in that match, uh, Black Ninja prevailed as he was the new rule breaker coming to the island, so he needed the win. They had again a TV match in Catania on March 16, where if Ninja could beat Perez, he will become the number one contender to the Puerto Rico heavyweight title. And in an amazing match, you can see in Armstrong Alley, Ninja defeated Miguel Perez to become the number one contender to the Puerto Rico heavyweight title. So the question then came, could Super Black Ninja beat Miguel Perez for a third straight time, or will Miguel Perez be able to retain the title that he had held since December of 1987? That question was answered on the May 7 card in Iran Bison, where Miguel Perez retained his title, but not without some controversy, as Profe interfered and the referee was knocked down, and you got the whole, garbage finish that sometimes characterized Capital Sports Promotion during that time. So a rematch was set for the 14th of May, and in that match, not only did Ninja won the Puerto Rico heavyweight title, but him and Profe cut Miguel Perez's hair. Embarrassed by this incident, Miguel Perez challenged Super Black Ninja to a hair match to be held in his hometown of Carolina. In the promo of the match, Profe had a piece of paper and was cutting it with scissors, saying that tonight they were going to make sure to finish the job because they felt that they had left Perez with not the complete job that it was supposed to be done, the haircut. So they were going to embarrass Perez in front of his people, and they were going to leave him bald and humiliated. And after tonight, there was not going to be any more controversy of who was the rightful Puerto Rico heavyweight champion. Perez mentioned that he was not going to lose in front of his people and promised that tonight he would get his revenge. The match, which you can see in its entirely in YouTube, had the fans right on the edge. And it was a back and forth action, finishing with Miguel Perez doing one of those most beautiful German suplexes that we had seen in 1988 to pin a Super Black Ninja and gain some level of revenge, defeating Ninja and winning the hair in a great match that, again, you could see it's entirely in YouTube. That made Perez again the number one contender, and a match was set between them for the Puerto Rico title for the next night in Aguadilla, which in the West Coast, which is usually where Capital Sports Promotion held their Sunday cards. And there, Perez had a backup. He had Huracan Castillo, his tag team partner. He was going to be handcuffed to Ninja's manager, El Profe. So that way, Profe could not interfere, and there could be a clear winner in this feud between Miguel Perez and Super Black Ninja. But right when it looked like Perez was on the verge of winning back his title, Profe pulled a chain from his pants to knock Castillo, and he gave it to Super Black Ninja, who then used it to knock out Perez and retain the Puerto Rico heavyweight title. Or so it seemed. TNT came running from the dressing room and told the ref what had just happened. And he hoped Super Black Ninja while the ref checked his tie, discovering the chain in his pants, leading then to the ref stating that the title was declared vacant and no one had the title, that there would have to be a future match between them to settle the score of who was rightfully the Puerto Rico heavyweight champion. That set a match for the title in the town of Aguadilla, where both fought to a time limit. The rematch on June 11 in a card held in Caguas that I was present, Ninja regained the title, but in a very controversial finish with the ending of both having the shoulders down, but Ninja pulling his shoulder up at the last minute to recover the title. So that took Miguel Perez to ask for a final match, a last opportunity between them, and that match was going to be held at the Roberto Clemente Stadium in a 2 out of 3 falls, where there must be a winner between them in the big June 18 card that was going to be held in Roberto Clemente Stadium. Sadly, in a match that there's no clip, which is a real shame. I say it would have been incredible to see this match. 2 out of 3 falls between two of the best wrestlers in the island in that time period of Puerto Rico. Ninja defeated Perez 2 falls for 1 to win the feud between them. Sadly, that was the end of the feud. If you go by TV or what was going on TV, it seemed that they were setting Super Black Ninja versus TNT in a Battle of the Ninjas, as TNT had a similar gimmick for the fall and maybe anniversary. But sadly, the bloody murder changed every plan that Capital Sports Promotion had for that for the rest of 1988. As soon as Bloody was killed by Jose Gonzalez, Muta left the island, losing the title in a phantom change against Ricky Santana. And that was the last time we saw Super Black Ninja in Puerto Rico into his retirement tour, where he came to Puerto Rico, again managed by El Profe, to say goodbye to the fans of Puerto Rico that had received him so well for so many years. Miguel Perez, well, he continued and attacked him with Huracan Castillo Jr. And after Super Black Ninja, they both challenged on the Kansas Jayhawks for the North American titles in a great feud, a tag team feud that ended in a hair versus hair match in Anniversary 88. But we cannot underestimate the importance of this feud in the island of Puerto Rico. For us, Puerto Rico fans, that was our Tiger Mask versus Dynamite Kid match or series of matches where we saw something that we had never seen before and that changed the way we could see wrestling in the island of Puerto Rico. There was more than just blood, hardcore violence, stipulations. There was good technical wrestling, and it was given to us by Miguel Perez Jr. and Super Black Ninja. They had a couple matches, I believe, in New Japan in the early 90s between them. I don't know if they're in New Japan World or not, but that they continue the feud, and that feud in that time capsule, what's going on in Puerto Rico 36 years later is still remembered as a great feud because again it was something different from what we were used to during that time, and it provide a glimpse of what wrestling later became in the 90s and the year 2000s and what it is today. You know, great moves, great speed, amazing talent going at it to determine who was the best during that time. So for a lot of the fans of the island, this is our, Tiger Mask Dynamite Kid feud that you guys have in the United States. That's how good it was for us. 36 years later, Super Black Ninja, you mentioned him to fans in Puerto Rico, and a smile comes out because people remember him and they love him. And man, you remember that guy, you remember this. And if you ask Miguel Perez, he probably has been asked many, many times, you know, about his feud with the Super Black Ninja. That's how well remembered this feud is. Hopefully, you guys have enjoyed this episode of Stories from the Last Territory. I wanted to do a mid card. I just didn't want to settle into just the main feuds. But next week, we're going to talk about one where even to this day, you ask people, where were you when this happened? And we're going to be talking about probably the greatest turn in the history of Puerto Rico, the Chiqui Star turn against Invader One Jose Gonzalez that opened the floodgates to what happened between 1986 and 1991. So hopefully you guys enjoy this podcast. You can send me any questions at luiscuevas36 at gmail. You could find me in X under Caveman at Caveman Zona W. You could also find me here in YouTube and Desde los Territorios Pro Wrestling Dumb. If you like the content, please subscribe. That will mean a lot to me. And you could find us right in Spotify. If by any chance you want to try Spanish, well, I have a Spanish podcast called Desde los Territorios. We have 170 episodes talking about the history of wrestling in the different territories. And we go year by year of Capital Sports Promotion. We do biographies of some of the greatest wrestlers in the era of the territory. So if you want to try me in Spanish, check Desde los Territorios in Spotify or any of the digital audio formats that you like. Into them, like Jose, like one, like Padin Hijo would say, sayonara, my friends.